Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of the 100th Mile podcast that's covering the Via race. We are live out on the road. This is day 2 and I'm with Ian, who's going to give us an in-depth analysis of what's going on today. So Ian, why don't we have a look at what's been happening with the riders, and you can talk us through some of the big movements over the last 28 hours.
Yes,
do you want to tell them about it?
This is the Madcap app, Madcap are our partners. They're a new tracking company run by Hugo and Sam, two ultra cyclists who decided that they wanted to offer something a bit different, something a bit better, and we've worked very closely with them since their inception last August, September, when we realised that our projects were running parallel to each other and we could collaborate very closely and essentially partner so that we'd get the best of both worlds. For them, they get an international race across Europe, and for us, we get to get our requirements fulfilled by these guys who are fantastic software developers.
So you're about to see just how good this software is as Ian goes through it today and can demonstrate to you how the race has been unfolding.
So they have this brilliant timeline feature with a jog dial, so you can go forwards and backwards. So if we go to the start, everybody's in Cartagena at the very centre. So I'll zoom in and I'll show you just how many people we have here. And
if you look there, we've got not only the dots of where the riders are, but there's also a heat map, a trace line for every individual rider, which makes this even more interesting to analyse.
That's right. We've got a trace of each rider, not just their dots. So with the traces on, and that you can configure that to turn it off. You can see that all the riders started splitting off as soon as the race was deneutralised, as soon as the police pulled off, and all the riders could then free route their way towards where we are now.
So just for anyone who's unfamiliar with this kind of racing, one of the core tenets of the racing is that the riders have to reach certain gates throughout the race, but between those gates they choose, don't they? They decide,
yeah.
And they've had as long as they wanted, really, months, weeks. Some of them have done it in days or on the way down to the race, and we'll talk about that in a short while.
Absolutely true.
They've made their own routes up, all of them, every single one of them.
We have given the riders the opportunity to to route between these mandatory locations, so they must go through these points, which we call gates or refuges. They must reach all these gates or refuges. And it doesn't necessarily need to be in any particular order. There will be some oddities, but in general they will go through them pretty much all in the same way.
And to give some kind of perspective, obviously we started at 9 o'clock yesterday morning. It's been over a day of racing. They haven't reached the first of these gates yet. How far away is the first gate from the start?
I think it's about 800 kilometers from the start.
So that allows for a huge amount of variability in terms of the routes, and you'll see that in a second that these riders have chosen to take.
Absolutely. And what we've done is we've tried to provide as few gates as possible, but where the gates are located, those are really beautiful locations which the riders can enjoy to see something that they've never seen before. Really stunning places, but also quite tranquil. It's not about sending people to brutal climbs, but to places which are unexplored typically. So they may be a bit off the beaten track, and they won't be the big names like Alpe d'Huez or the Galibier, but there's some places which we think are quite special, and they'll enjoy them in particular.
Right, let's get into the nitty gritty of it. We can break all that down in a second. Let's have an overview of what's happened over the last 28 hours then, Ian.
The men's category is led by Adam Bialek, who from a very, very early point took a good lead, and he must be, I think, about 70 kilometers ahead. Here you can see his progress. He has already passed Valladolid and is heading into the Picos. This is the current state of play at this point in time, just past 3:13.
It really is a remarkable ride. I mean, we got a few hours sleep last night, didn't we? And I think you woke me up at 6 o'clock this morning. You're like, we need to get back on the road. We need to chase these guys. And I couldn't believe how many hours we were driving down the motorway for. Pretty fast, within the speed limits. And we still weren't anywhere near Adam. It's true testament to how good this guy is, and many of the other riders around him.
I mean,
just how fast they're going.
We can talk about how good Adam Bialek is, but he's incredibly experienced.
Yeah.
But back to the free
we
routing.
We will come back to Adam shortly, because that's a really interesting one to discuss, I think, today. Tell us about who's leading the other categories.
So in second place is Will Valsden. The other really strong performance by Joanna Ruminska from Poland. She is following the same track as Adam. This is not coincidence, because it is almost a straight line. They have picked a very nice pass. I had predicted back in October that this is the pass that they would cross. It is called Puerto de Navacerrada, and most of the, I think almost maybe all of the top 10 will cross here. There's only one real outlier in that. So yes, this is pretty much the straight line between Cartagena and the Picos.
And then we have a few unexpected riders. Sam Muscat's doing particularly well, isn't he? He's not raced. He's not officially in the rookie category, but he hasn't raced a race like this before.
Sam Muscat has been incredibly strong, and he's taken a good route. Although he's had some tracker difficulties. He's sleeping at the moment, but he is very much heading on the same track as Adam and Joanna. This is good routing by a rookie.
There's an awful lot of dots there, that people who are in quite close vicinity to one another, and we are still in the early stages of this race. I think some of the fascinating points we can look at are perhaps, well, we can talk about, not everyone's going to finish this race, are they? Because we've already had a couple of riders scratching. Should we mention that?
Yeah, so Dennis Marino scratched very early. He scratched within about 6 hours. So here you can see where he scratched. He was vomiting from 11 o'clock in the morning. I spoke to him on the phone. We don't take scratches by text. He sounded quite bad, but he was okay. He had decided that he was going to scratch and join his wife in Valencia. Another scratch was Francisco Sevilla Caron, and he spoke to Ingeborg about midday today. He had not been feeling well. He could barely walk. This is not a good state to be in. Maybe he should have stopped sooner. He has clearly been affected very badly by the heat, but maybe he should have taken better care of himself, better hydration. Maybe he should have taken a break earlier.
Okay, and anyone else scratched? Or was it just our one rider? Anyone close to scratching?
It's just the two. I'm sure there are others who are close to scratching. We've had a couple of other messages from other riders. They were, I think, concerned for their health, and we have sent them some advice as to what to do, because we are very concerned for everybody's health and safety. That really comes first.
And I think a lot of riders took it very hard yesterday, that heat, especially not being used to it. Even if you are used to it, brutal to ride through those temperatures, and there was a lot of sickness, cramps, all sorts of things. So I think some people are, thinking twice, taking a very sensible option. They might just be resting. They might have realised, the race is long, which you have to remember, and it's worth taking a day now and recovering if you can, and then getting back into it.
Absolutely, and some riders took very sensible options, like stopping early, taking siestas in the hottest part of the day around 4 o'clock. Some riders stopped at 6 o'clock to get a hotel, and that may have paid dividends in looking after themselves, because today is not so hot, and in the evening I think we saw the temperature drop by 10 degrees, by 15 degrees. At some of the peaks of the climbs today, it had dropped to 15 degrees in the Sistema Central, and we could really feel it up there.
What a contrast from what we were experiencing yesterday afternoon.
I mean,
I'm sure the riders would be very grateful of that this morning.
Yeah, I mean, we saw peaks in the car at 42 degrees, so 42 down to 15. That's a big drop of 27 degrees.
It was hard, wasn't it? And they were complaining about the wind. Right, we're gonna delve a little bit deeper into this in just a minute. But before we do that, we have the segment of the day.
Got it working.
Hannibal's tale of the day. Ian, over to you. Give us a little anecdote from our man Hannibal, who was the first person to pioneer this route.
So, some people will question whether or not Hannibal ever went to the Picos, and that he actually crossed the Pyrenees somewhere closer to Barcelona. Now, he did actually go to the Picos, but not in 218 BCE, when he had started his invasion of Italy. He did go to the Picos. It is documented that he went on a kind of a vengeance mission against some Celtiberian tribes. Carthage, his home country, his home city, had decided to try to take over as much of the Iberian Peninsula as possible. This really escalated into the Second Punic War, which was triggered by Hannibal invading Saguntum and taking over that city, just a bit north from where Cartagena is currently. So that really sparked the start of the Second Punic War.
I don't think our riders have started any feuds yet, have they? We haven't seen that. So there's a little bit of a difference there between what Hannibal was doing and what our guys are doing.
We haven't seen that, and hopefully all the riders are still friends. But there's definitely some contention. There's definitely some rivalries, especially when we saw Michele Pagano in 4th place, followed by Christian, maybe not even a couple of minutes later, descending just by the road here between Puerto Nevecerrada and on their way to Valladolid.
All right, let's talk about the routing, because that's really a focus for today, and it's highlighting in the actions. I think it's quite exciting to see places jumping because of the routing that people are taking. We're going to start with some of the textbook routing from those masters of this, probably the most experienced riders. Why don't you give us a couple of examples of what you've been really impressed with so far, Ian?
So both Adam Bialek and Will Valsden have chosen very similar routes. They're probably somewhere between 95 to 99% the same so far.
And I guess it's no surprise that those are our two leaders in the race right now.
They are. Adam is number 1, Will is number 2 on the road overall. So they have chosen a pretty direct route, but very sensible choices of climbs. So that's why their route is so similar. And it is about travelling as flat and as fast as possible. Obviously, the more elevation gain you have, the slower you go, and you never get it back. You also try to avoid the urban areas where possible, but it looks like both Adam and Will have had a very clear run through Madrid, which is somewhat unexpected, but maybe they just hit it early hours. I mean, Adam had crossed the Sistema Central by sunrise this morning at about 6:30.
It's quite interesting. Maybe let's wind the map back a bit so you can just see exactly where these guys have travelled, because it is an incredibly direct route, isn't it? Like right from the start, they've just blasted their way in a pretty uniform direction out of there. And as I say, anyone can go away and they can look up Via. It's accessible to all. See where all the riders are at any given time. Trackers update every 5 minutes.
So you can see that Adams had the lead very early on, and he just wound his way towards this point in Madrid. Now, the red line on the map is a banned road. We'll come on back to that in a second.
I was just going to say, yeah. So they were told well in advance when they did their routing, that's something they need to make sure they avoid, because it's quite a dangerous road. You've reconnaissanced the whole area, haven't you? And you tried riding on there, and very, very heavy with traffic.
That's right. I mean, we take riders to places which we know, and we know to be less busy. We route riders away from the really dangerous and busy areas, such as coastal regions, the heavily built up areas, capital cities, for example. Now, this banned road we rode in October, and it was hellish. We rode up it maybe only halfway because there was some gravel which got us part of the way.
Which is an interesting point of discussion, and I think it brings us on to another one of the riders who's been doing very, very well in the race. He was right up there this morning in the top 3. That's Paolo from Italy. Do you want to tell us a bit about how Paolo's been routing and what's, I suppose, unique about where he's decided to go?
So I thought that Paolo was going to take this very similar route to everybody else. So both.
We're looking at early in the morning here, and he's in 3rd position overall.
Yes. So Paolo was on the same track pretty much as Will and Adam, and they had crossed paths almost to the northwest of Madrid. Now, what Paolo did next was somewhat unexpected. We were watching the tracker and realised that he'd actually gone on the banned road. This banned road we had put in the rules to not go on because it's basically a dual carriageway. It's used by all the heavy traffic, big lorries, going uphill, going downhill. It's incredibly busy when they close the motorway tunnel beneath this pass. And we had experienced it, and we just said, no way are we going to allow riders to go up this. And we'd rather ban it for everybody so that everybody would have the same pleasant ride. There are lots of nice passes, both to the east and the west, along the Sistema Central, and the road is continued on this pass by a road which is often used by heavy traffic again, drivers who are trying to avoid the toll road, trying to avoid the toll of going through the tunnel. So that is one to avoid for something like 30 kilometers. That's why we banned it. And we found that Paolo Botti had made his way all the way to the top. We contacted him directly. We tried to call him first, and then we messaged him. Eventually he responded. He thought that he wasn't on the banned road. He had made a mistake, and we intercepted him only at the top. He said that...
So, to throw a few stats in there, from the town at the bottom, he had climbed almost 500 metres, 490 metres, and he'd gone 7.4 kilometres out of town off route by the time we found him this morning.
That's correct. It's not the highest climb, but it is very unpleasant. It's not that steep, but obviously to do an extra 500 metres of climbing is not efficient. So he probably lost somewhere in the region of an hour and a half. Who knows about the energy expenditure? It depends on how much effort he put in there. But
I think it's more, for me, and the reason I felt really sorry for him was because he'd been riding all night. He'd been riding for over a day, and he was right up there in the mix with the top three. And I just couldn't, I was trying to empathise, but I couldn't imagine how devastating that must be when you're told you've just wasted all that energy. It's not like you've been riding on a flat road for an hour, but you've wasted all that energy coming up the climb, and you've got to go back on yourself, and you're going to lose your position.
Yeah.
Tough thing to deal with.
Yeah, and he thought that we were going to disqualify him. So the first thing he said to us was, just give me a penalty, anything. And I said to him, look, what you need to do now, and this is your penalty, is to just go back down the way you came and to reroute from there. I'm sure he had a good descent. I think the descent only took him about 15 minutes. But he was somewhat demoralised in, I guess, how well he thought he was doing. And certainly he has lost a good amount of time and energy in relation to the top three now.
And I think what was worth bearing in mind was that he clearly had no ill intent. He'd made a mistake. I think he threw his hands up and he owned up to that, as devastating as it was for him. And it's, you have to react to the situation, don't you? And it was penalty enough, I think, in all of our eyes, that he'd lost that position. He'd lost a lot of time. It's frustrating, but fantastic for everyone that he's back in the race now. And we saw him later in the day, and the sun had come up, and his spirits were up. He just crested another climb.
Yeah, and we saw him again at the top of the Puerto Navecerrada, which is the climb which both Adam and Will chose. But he made a mistake with his routing. He hadn't read the rules properly. That was his error. So yeah, I think now he's back in the top three actually. So he's still riding strongly, and he was happy when you spoke to him at the top.
Right, let's focus on some people who've gone very rogue with their routing, and I know there are a couple of examples you might want to choose. Why hasn't everyone followed this? The majority have. But why do you think everyone hasn't followed that trunk route straight directly through the middle?
I think some people have not been properly prepared, even though they have had months to do so. They've known about these gates. They've known about where they need to go, the mandatory locations. I think people are using different routing software. So some people are using Strava, some people are using Komoot, some people are using Ride with GPS, or a combination. And it's always good to cross-check these things. So obviously the fastest way of getting anywhere is by road, and it's not off-road. Going off-road is a very slow way. Paths can sometimes not be marked. They can turn into rocks or mud. They could be unrideable at all, and you might need to carry your bike if you get really badly lost.
And we saw this right from the start, didn't we? I mean, we can see two riders have headed west, and a couple of riders headed east off that route, quite considerably far off the route.
Yes, so the two riders who went really west were Enrico Halix and Fiona Shorten. They have since caught up with the pack, and you also have Will Dixon and Ollie Kahn, who went off to the east. Both these two groups diverging from the main pack, the main route, the straight line, They have lost a lot of distance, and free routing is a skill that all ultracyclists should have. When you're an ultracyclist, you have to cross countries yourself. You have to create your own routes. And Will and Ollie and Fiona and Enrico all have chosen not good routes. They have added probably in the region of maybe 2-3 hours extra riding, and that's really put them behind. Doesn't matter how strong you are, your routing when it's bad can lose you the race. And I think Will have hoped for a top 10. He will have to fight for that now. But they are all still going, so credit to them. They are still moving forwards.
But I think an interesting point from now on in the race is if you are a bit further behind, the riders can pull out this app and they can see where everyone is in front, and they can probably work out who's making mistakes, who's choosing the right routes, and maybe that will influence them changing what they'd intended to do.
Yeah, I mean, one example of that might be Paolo's error in going to the band road, or going up the band road, where he had gone up. We sent him back down, and shortly after, Christian came to Guadarrama, and maybe he hesitated. He seemed to hesitate for a while, and then he decided to go north instead. And instead of taking Puerto de Navacerrada, which is a very nice climb and beautifully paved, it was freshly paved last October, and they had actually closed the road to everybody but cyclists, so it was wonderful to ride on. And even today they closed the road for cyclists going up it the other way on a Gran Fondo. But Christian decided to take this other route, parallel to Navacerrada.
Absolutely. So this brings us into another aspect of routing. Do you stay on the road, or do you do some of those hiker bike or off-road sections when you think it might provide a shortcut? What do we think Christian's done here? Because he's moved away from the paved roads, hasn't he?
I think he made a big mistake here. If you're going to do a hiker bike, if you're going to take that gamble, I think there needs to be a big trade-off in terms of time, distance and effort. It took Adam somewhere in the region of an hour and a quarter to cross from Madrid, or the bottom of the climb of Puerto de Navacerrada, to the other side where we are right here, whereas it took Christian somewhere like 3 hours. So 1.25 versus 3 hours. He's lost almost 2 hours. I don't know if he's damaged his tyres off-road. I don't know if he's damaged his cleats and so forth, and how much more energy he's expended, especially the mental energy. But we'll find out more about that because our roving photographer and videographer Ryan caught up with Christian and had a little chat with him on the way down.
What's also interesting in that, on the screen that we're looking at there, we've also got Paolo in the shot. And so Paolo was the gentleman we talked about earlier who'd made the mistake and gone up the band climb, lost his positions. But I think this is just an example of why you should never give up or be too despondent in a race like this, because other people are making mistakes too. And so he fell behind Christian. Christian's potentially made quite a big mistake with his routing, and then Paolo's jumped ahead again. So you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, you can see just how fast Michele catches up with Christian, and Paolo just disappears over the climb, whereas Christian is just probably lost in the woods here at the top of the climb, where it looks like a road here, but there's no road there. We've checked it out on Street View, and prior to that, we've looked at. We spent a lot of time checking out which roads riders are likely to cross. So Michele was way behind, and now he's just ahead of Christian.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. And I think even the support crew, we're all glued to the dots. We need to see where everyone is, for safety reasons and everything else. And we're trying to work out how clever are they being. Do they know something we don't know? Have they found something we don't? But so far, I think a few who'd gone rogue with their routes from the main pack have come back on the straight and narrow. There is one outlier, isn't there, off to the east still, who's really decided to do something very different to everyone else.
Yeah, Rob Roy Cameron has decided to go very far east, and this is deviating from the straight line a lot. I think he was trying to be clever to get to the Picos with less elevation, but there is no avoiding the Sistema Central, which spans all the way from Portugal, the Portuguese border, past Madrid, Yeah, I mean, this is a bad move. He is still climbing. He was in, I think, the top 3 sometime yesterday evening, and now he's maybe dropping out the top 10. I would think that he's added another few hours onto his ride, maybe even more, and there's a lot of elevation. One of the things that I did when I chose the gates was to figure out all the routes that they might take, all the sections that they may risk a hiker bike. I just decided that there was probably 1 or 2 passes to the east of the band road, and 1 or 2 just to the west, which Mark Buchel is leading that particular trajectory, followed by Pavel Piachka and Nikki Shaw, whereas Joanna has really put in a big effort, and she is already over the Sistema Central and descending right now. She'll probably be passing us any moment now and be captured on film.
Well, I think that's probably a good cue on which to pack up and go and get out there with the riders. Thank you for your insight, Ian. Looking forward to seeing how this evolves, and you can obviously find out yourself before you listen to us again tomorrow, and you can watch where they're all going. So best of luck to all the riders. Catch you tomorrow.